Hello and welcome. Please take a seat. So today I've got Gemma as a guest, and we'll be talking about her experience of COVID, some of the challenges that she's faced and how she's overcome them. And actually, what's the most amazing thing of all is she's managed to turn those challenges, some really life-changing things as well. She's managed to turn them into such positivity, and she's now producing something that she's selling. I won't spoil the surprise just yet. And it's actually going to raise some money for a charity as well. That's incredible. Okay, so sit tight, sit comfortably, grab yourself a brew, and I'll see you in there. Hello and welcome to the next Ask the Expert series interview, chat, whatever we're going to call it, as part of the Superhero Finder series. Now, this is episode 15. Thank you for tuning in. And I have the absolute pleasure to welcome Gemma on today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm absolutely fantastic. I wish this weather would make its mind up, though.
Oh, tell me about it.
one minute it's sunny and the next minute it's hailing. But we're not here to talk about small things like the weather, because what we like to do on this series is really spread some messages and find out about some real life superheroes like yourself. And we're going to find out a little bit more about that. Because you've had I think the screen went off then. It don't matter. It's all right. So over this last 18 months, we've all known about the pandemic and COVID-19. And you've really had probably a different experience to the pandemic and COVID itself over the last year or so, haven't you? Would you like to just tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I mean, back in March, when everyone heard about the pandemic, when it started, I was kind of on the fence with my understanding of it and whether I thought it was as big as the media made out. And I guess I didn't really know much about it, but stuck to the rules throughout. In my particular area, we had one of the worst, right? So we stayed in a local lockdown for much longer than other people did. But yeah, my experience of COVID, I tried to avoid all the media negativity around it and just think, let's just roll with it. You know, it's fine, stick to the rules, do what we can, and we'll come out the other side, no problem. And then, unfortunately, my son brought COVID home from school in October, and I caught it from him. So, you know, I didn't know what to expect at the time, because of course, you know, we'd done so well at avoiding it and sticking to all the rules, and really, you know, not seeing loved ones like many people have experienced. And so yeah, there we were in this position where we both had COVID, and we went into our 2 weeks isolation. And my son was absolutely fine. So he didn't have a cough, he didn't have any kind of sign other than he lost his taste. And that was it.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for that, we would have had no idea that he had COVID. You know, he was just sat at the table eating his tea saying, I can't taste this. And I was thinking, well, it's pretty spicy, so you should be able to.
Yeah.
So we got tested. There we were. We both had COVID, and he was perfectly fine after a couple of days. He got his sense of taste back, no issues. I, on the other hand, was really, really ill with it. I was still trying to work for the first few days because it was just like a really strong cold. And I thought, power through it, it's going to be fine. And prior to having COVID, I'd maybe taken a week off sick in God knows how many years of working. So I just thought, power through it, it's going to be absolutely fine. And as the time went by, so maybe the second week of having COVID, I got really bad chest pains, shoulder pains, just really, really awful body symptoms. And I just couldn't cope with it. So I started, I stayed off work, and I started speaking to my GP and saying, you know, I don't know what's going on here. It doesn't seem to be getting any better. And the time just went on, and I don't know where it went, because, you know, weeks turned into a couple of months without me even noticing. It was such a horrible place to be in, mentally and physically. And it all just blended into one. And the more that time went on, and the more I spoke to my GP about it, the more I started to realise that it wasn't likely to be going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
And you know, at the beginning of when I caught COVID, there wasn't really much talk of long COVID. It wasn't really a thing that was out in the media yet. You know, cases of it hadn't been reported on as widely as they are now, and even now they're not massively reported on, but just wasn't something that I knew anything about. And then the GP started throwing the idea of long COVID around, probably 2 months into me actually contracting it. And it was only in March that they then opened a long COVID clinic up locally.
Right, okay.
And the GP then referred me through the long COVID clinic. And here we are 7 months later, and I'm still suffering with it, or with the after effects of it, rather.
Wow. So long COVID, so just to confirm that, so long COVID is the idea that the COVID isn't just coming and going as it would in many people. It is actually staying, and it's residual within your body, isn't it? So what has that meant for you then? Because that must have a massive impact, like you said about the time just flying by, and before you knew it, a couple of months had gone by. So what kind of things did you do to kind of, I suppose at that point when people are in lockdown, people that maybe hadn't contracted COVID or anything like that, you find coping mechanisms to get through the time, because if you weren't working, then you're at home, but then you're not feeling particularly well, are you? So were there any things that you found that actually helped you just get through that time at that point? And then we'll find out about nearer stuff.
Yeah, it was really, really difficult at that point in time, because everybody was in a lockdown situation. So there was no being able to turn to family or friends for any kind of support. Nobody wanted to come near me, obviously, understandably. But even once I was out of that 2-week isolation period, there was still a further 2 or 3 months where I didn't see anybody at all, just because I think I was really worried about the risks then, the risks of me potentially passing it on to other people. So I had to kind of find my own ways of coping that didn't involve other people. And that was really, really difficult to do in the confines of your own house. You've got limited options. So I tried the usual kind of mindfulness and listening to music and trying to find ways of relaxation. And then I started doing a bit of drawing, because I'd done some drawing in the past, just sketches, nothing major.
Yeah.
And then I read an article online about painting being more relaxing, being, good for the mind. And I thought, I'm absolutely terrible at painting, but I'll give it a go. I've not done it since high school, and I'll not tell you how long ago that was.
But there's only you that'll see it. Well, we think.
Well. But so I thought I'll try painting. I'll see how that goes. And I bought some cheap watercolors and kind of took it from there, really, and started just painting nothing of any interest or value, and nothing that was even that good. But I found it was really kind of relaxing, and took my mind off all the body pains and things.
So it was, I suppose I can imagine that with watercolor, actually, just because of some of the tones, the colors give, they're quite pastely, aren't they? And the way the water looks and stuff. Did you start noticing a difference in your skill level when you went on, or did you end up with a room full of wet paper that was not particularly looking like anything?
So I've got 2 books. I've got book number 1, which is just full of all my practice work. Yeah. And the quality of that, oh God, some of it is really awful. But then by the time you get to towards the end of the watercolor book, the painting starts improving, and I think I started to find my own style. Mm-hmm. And then once I worked out what my style was, which is basically watercolor illustration, so watercolor paint but with kind of pen work as well. Yeah. Once I found the style, then I was happy with what I was producing. Whereas before, when I was just chucking paint at paper and seeing what happened, it wasn't great. So,
well, I suppose it just takes some time to refine, like anything, doesn't it? And do you still paint to this day, all these months on?
Yeah, I still paint. I still do the illustrating side of things, and I focus more on buildings now, which I mean, when I used to sketch, I used to draw portraits. So automatically, when I started painting, I tried painting portraits, and so different. It was just, they were just awful. So I moved away from portraits onto animals, which was slightly better. And now I do buildings and landmarks. And I'm kind of happy with that. So
awesome. Will you be selling any in the Tate Gallery anytime soon?
Might be pushing it a bit.
You never know. Aim high.
Yeah.
So now so I've seen something interesting. So before we started recording this, obviously we had a bit of a catch up, and you moving swiftly on from watercolor. Then you've actually you've made a book, haven't you?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So again, back to sort of coping strategies and limited options. This was in April, and lockdown here locally, it has eased, but not as much. I mean, we've got one of the worst rates in the UK. So, and I suppose me having the personal experience that I have and such terrible experiences with COVID, I'm really even more cautious about going out and booking things or doing things. So it was just, it was one of those things. It was a rainy day. I was trying to de-stress and get into the zone a bit more. And my son was sat on the sofa playing on his Xbox. And I said, tell me what I can paint next. You know, what do you think I should paint? What should I do? And he said, oh, just, paint a bird. I think he was half listening to me at this point. He sat there facing the Xbox. And he went, just paint a bird. And I went, right, okay. What kind of bird? Because, there's God knows how many different kinds of birds out there. And I was trying to engage him a bit because he's a real nature buff. So I said, right, okay, what type of bird then? And he went, oh, something cute like a wren. And wrens are like really teeny tiny, cute little birds. So I said, yeah, that's a great idea. But they're one colour, they're just brown. They're just a brown small bird that's like, I thought, this is not going to be much to this painting, is there? So I said to him, right, okay, we'll go with a wren. What's its name? What we're going to call it? And what colour can it be? So he said to me, oh, we'll call it Ben the wren, and make him pink. I thought, right, okay, great, I can work with that. Pink's a bit more entertaining than just brown. So I scribbled this little bird down, and I was just painting away this little pink bird, and my son chirps up behind me and says, oh, by the way, give him a friend. I was like, what do you mean give him a friend? He said, well, he needs a friend, doesn't he, this Ben the wren? He needs to make a friend, and he needs some parents. And before I know it, we've got this whole story going on between us about this bird, this character, and the friends it was going to make and what it was going to do. And initially I just painted like one piece with a little caption underneath it. But I realised that the amount of ideas that were flying around, we could probably put it into a short story. I had absolutely no intention of creating a book that I was going to sell. I just thought, we're going to do this little project together. We're going to create our own little book. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fun. So I put this book together with just really short snippets of information and these little bird characters. But it's always been important for me to kind of promote equality and diversity, and I've always been a big advocate for LGBT things, and I've done a lot of charity work in the past. So I thought, if I am going to make a short story out of it, I need it to be a short story that's got an important message in it.
Yes.
And because we already had a pink bird called Ben, I automatically thought, okay, so this is kind of squashing the stereotype of boys being blue.
Yeah.
because we've got a boy bird that's pink, and I thought, let's roll with that, let's stick that in there, let's make sure we've got a good message around blue not just being for boys. And yeah, I mean, really, it just went from there, and it turned into this little book with Ben the wren that's trying to find acceptance, and he's different from other people, from other birds even, you know, because he's a pink boy bird and all of the other boy birds are blue, and his sisters are pink. So he's, you know, he doesn't fit in, and he's got to find that acceptance for himself and come to terms with himself. And I think in a way, part of that was resonating with my current mental state, in terms of having to accept myself how I was or how I am since COVID. Because pre-COVID my life was so different, and COVID has changed a lot in terms of my physical and mental ability. So I think part of my own message and what I needed to hear at the time was also in the book, in terms of having to accept yourself.
Yeah. And we'll try not to spoil the story too much, because it's a very, very charming story. And I got the book, and what we'll do, I think, is we'll just pop the link below, because some of the money's going to charity, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. So what we do, I mean, like I say, it was never, the intention was never there to make money from it or to sell it. So what we decided to do when we were coming up with the idea, and we realized that you could self-publish on Amazon. So we thought we'd do that. And then what we do is 50% of the profit from the sales goes to the Alzheimer's Society. And then the other 50%, we reinvest back into the business, and we purchase more copies of the book, and we send it out to children's wards, children's hospitals, adoption agencies, a few primary schools and nurseries, and a select few of local businesses as well.
That's it. That's incredible itself. And that way of self-publishing is ingenious. I'd never actually heard of that.
No, me neither.
But it cuts out the whole, you must have a massive book that has this many pages and go to a publisher, and then you got to have a minimum. It just makes it a lot more accessible, which I think in some ways the lockdown has driven a lot more of the online stuff and the ability to be able to do it yourself, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
One thing I just wanted to kind of come back to, which you alluded to, and it's your mental state, and you were saying about the similarities between the story of Ben the wren. I love it. It just flows off the tongue, doesn't it? And you know, and the way you were feeling, because and are feeling, and that's kind of what I wanted to get into as well, because not only with COVID, the diagnosis, and then looking at the symptoms and what you were still feeling as terms of the aftermath, the long COVID, but I think it'd be really, really powerful and interesting to know where you are now, and where you are now as part of this journey, because from what you've said, it's by no means over. And then just to, you know, to see maybe if there were any ways that could inspire people on how you looked at the past and saw how different things were, and see how things are now, and how you've got the strength to come on something like this with me and talk about it, but to put your efforts into a book that's going to raise money for charity and for all these good causes as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we probably start with explaining how things were before compared to how they are now, because I think it's really important to be able to express the difference and the huge impact of this. Because for me, prior to having COVID, I was a hiker, a mountain climber. You know, I do wild swimming and sailing, and I'd be hiking at every possible opportunity, like constantly. Any spare minute that I got, I'd be outside, and I'd be running every lunchtime, and I was really, really active, and that was what kept my mental health in check. And in the August before catching COVID, in the October, I was at the top of Ben Nevis with my son. You know, we did the highest mountain, and we did it easily. You know, we were at our absolute peak fitness. And then now since having COVID, that's completely changed for me. And like I say, that was my coping strategy in terms of mental health. My coping strategy was to get active, was to, get exercising, get out and about. So where I'm at now is, so in October, that's when I contracted COVID. October, November, December were a mixture of different conversations with the GP, about how I'm feeling and why is this not going away, what's going on. And in sort of January, February, it was a new year, it was a new start. Everyone was looking towards the end of lockdown and towards the restrictions lifting, and things were looking a bit more positive for everybody. But they weren't looking more positive for me, because for me, I've been trapped inside these four walls since October. I'd not left the house. I'd had to essentially, I feel like I had to grieve for my old life. And grieve for everything that I used to be able to do in terms of my capabilities. And in March, I was then referred to a long COVID clinic. So it was one of the first long COVID clinics to open up. Because I guess not much was really known about long COVID until more recently, when more cases were emerging where people weren't recovering. So this clinic opened up in March and they referred me to that. And that was basically a series of tests, CT scans, ECGs, blood tests, x-rays, all the different things on like my heart and lung functions. Because my main sort of symptoms were chest pain, breathlessness, and fatigue as well. So they put me through all these tests to try and make sure, or to try and find out what was wrong, basically. So the assumption was that whilst they were doing these tests, they would find something wrong with me. They'd be able to pinpoint what it was and they'd be able to treat it. And instead, what happened was everything came back clear. And so they came up with the conclusion that what I have as a result of COVID is chronic fatigue syndrome, which I think a lot of people suffer with, not as a result of COVID, but I think that the more time goes on, people that have had long COVID or have long COVID will eventually potentially have chronic fatigue syndrome, because it's quite common to occur as a result of a virus.
Right, okay.
So that's where I'm at now. And I can't do any of my hiking or walking. I have a young puppy and I can walk him for sort of 15 minutes a day on flat surfaces. But if I go up any sort of slight incline with him, it really takes its toll on my chest and my breathing. And that's a very difficult thing to come to terms with when it's such, it's poles apart, being at the absolute best of your fitness and at the top of mountains, to be restricted to really short walks around the local area. And also for me, I was never at home. I was very rarely at my house, and now I've left my house to go further afield twice in the last 7 months. So it really does take its toll mentally. I think the other thing is as well that when you first get sick, or for me certainly, when I first got COVID, it was more visible to people. I was coughing, my voice was noticeably strained. I was a lot more breathless than, I couldn't string a sentence together. So it was really a visible illness. Whereas as time went on and it became long COVID and then chronic fatigue syndrome, it stops being visible and it becomes a hidden disability that people can't see. And so therefore they don't necessarily know that it exists, or they don't understand. And when you first get sick, people, they ask how you are, they check in on you and things like that. They want to make sure you're all right. But I think the more that you don't have an answer for them, how are you feeling? Same as I was last week, same as I was last month. It becomes a repetitive answer and people stop asking over time. And so for everyone around you, you appear to be, you know, recovered, or they kind of shut off from it a bit because it's been going on for so long.
Yeah.
So it can be quite an isolating place to be in as well. And in terms of mentally, to try and get your head around that, it's really just about looking at what you do have and focusing in what you have and not what you don't have. And even if what you have is so limited, like for me, it's limited to these four walls and no exercise and exertion. It's very, very limited options, but there are still things that you can look at, like, you know, mindfulness and painting, even if you're totally rubbish at painting, or a little bit of gardening, even if you kill your plants off within the first week. You know?
I mean, exactly the same. Yeah.
I bought a house plant, and honestly, it was meant to be one of the easiest plants to take care of. And about 2 weeks, I think it lasted.
How? I remember
know.
us being kids having things like yuccas that never seemed to die, and you never have to water them either. But that's impressive that you managed to kill it off in 2 weeks.
I think I overwatered it. You know, I think I've drowned it. I think so. I think I was just really so kind of focused on taking care of this plant that I overcared for it. But there you go. So yeah, that's where I'm at, really. You know, it's been a huge change, and I'm not going to say that's been easy to accept, because it really hasn't, and it takes a lot of strength to kind of focus and not get dragged down in what you can't do, and really just kind of think, okay, yes, I can't do these things, what can I do? You know, what small differences can I make? And I think that charity work is always a great thing to do. So you know, for me, the book just happened accidentally in a way, but it's charity work as well. So
of course it is, because I've always seen things like charity work or even volunteering, so things that aren't there to make money, or they're not there to create profit, we'll say, because we want them to make money, because you want to be able to produce them to go to good causes, you know. And that's a really good model. I love that. But it also, no matter what physically your ability is, or mentally to a certain extent, you have so much more power being able to do something for other people than you might do necessarily yourself. So doing something and getting this, you know, using Amazon to get this book and getting it out to people and kind of inspiring people the way that you are, you're almost able to use that as an ability. I wonder whether almost it's looking at the abilities that you used to have and going, right, well, I've still got that want, I've still got that drive to be able to do something, but actually I'm just going to channel it in a different way, because this is the rules that you've got to live by now. These are the boundaries that you've got to live by now. And quite rightly, like you say, looking at the small things, I suppose naturally you start to look at the moments each day, as opposed to necessarily some more of the long stuff. So especially as you've said, mindfulness, and that's very much about being grounded and respecting the moment that you're in, because I'm a big believer that life is a collection of moments. Some have been and some are to come, but right now is the only place that you're actually physically present. And even then, if you go deeper into that, a second ago is no longer now. But you know, we won't go too deep into that. But I suppose so I've always found strength in, especially this past year and a half, because you know, it changes things in different levels and different things for a lot of people, but not obviously. You've had all these physical effects from it, and you were saying before we came on this call that you were actually limited to 30 minutes of exertion, aren't you?
Yeah, so they call it the boom and bust cycle, and basically you feel all right. So like today, for example, I feel all right now, and so in my head, this is what used to happen before. As time went on, I got used to this, and I realized that I needed to stick within my boundaries. But initially I fought against my own boundaries, because this 30 minutes that you refer to, what happens is you feel all right, you go out there, you maybe go and do a longer walk than you would usually, because you're feeling all right.
Yeah.
And then the next day or a few hours later, that's when you suffer. So for me, they did a series of tests on me, and they found that 30 minutes is the maximum amount of exertion that I can have in a day. So that could be cleaning, cooking, walking, anything that's actually physically strenuous in any way, even in a minor way.
Yeah.
If I do 30 minutes, then tomorrow I feel fine. I do 30 minutes every day, I feel absolutely fine. Whereas if I did an hour today, tomorrow I'd feel awful.
Yeah.
So you've just got to stick within those boundaries. And at first, the days that I felt fine, I almost taught myself out of being ill. I wouldn't accept that I was ill.
Okay.
So I thought, feel fine today. I'm going to try and go for a run. I'm going to try and go on my treadmill, whatever. Absolutely worst idea ever. But until you accept your boundaries, it's really difficult.
Yeah. Well, I think it's almost like it's part of it. Like you said before, when you said it was a hidden illness, and when you're feeling okay, like you said, it's hidden, but it almost gets hidden to you.
Yeah,
unless you respect them boundaries, and I suppose you've experimented with those things, and and you've realized that actually the effects of how you feel the next day or the next 2 days, whatever that is, just isn't worth the actual doing the activity itself. I did want to ask as well, because you said about work. How have work been around the whole subject, and what's your future look like in terms of work and stuff, and where you're going with stuff?
Well, so initially when I was first off, and indeed the time that I was off sick, work were really, really supportive of that, absolutely fine. But then I guess in a similar sort of way, when I came back to work, then the sort of perception is that you're 100% fine because you're back at work, jobs are good, and crack on with it, so I don't really talk about it much at work, because I'm very fortunate in the sense that I work from home, so I don't have to do anything that requires me to be out and about at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Now, when the restrictions start lifting, my job would usually be out and about on the road visiting clients, and I don't know how things are going to look then, in all honesty, because I don't know how commuting and then potentially having to walk to a client's office and then talk and present on a meeting and things like that, I don't know how all of that is going to fit in with my 30 minutes of exertion. And I guess there's no real way of knowing until I'm in that situation. But I am very fortunate in that the company are really supportive. They do a lot of long COVID work as well, so they're very understanding of the situation. But I just don't know how it's going to look for the future of my actual role.
Yeah, it's because you do have a role where you would need to, I suppose, exert yourself in that way, like you said, a little bit of the walking and stuff like that. So sorry.
No, I was just going to say, potentially that, that will be a factor. But as you were saying earlier about things being able to be done more virtually and the technologies that we have now, I mean, at the moment, a lot of my meetings are done virtually, and that's potentially a safer way of going about things going forwards anyway. And also for the company, there's less time spent commuting. So there are a lot of positives to come from the virtual world. And I think that I could incorporate that a lot more to help with my situation going forward.
Yeah, definitely. You've just alluded to something that I just wanted to explore a little bit more, because what strikes me about talking to you and the way that you recite your story and everything, Gemma, is the fact that you're reliving it, but it almost feels like it's in a very positive way. Now, hearing the effects that it's had on you and hearing the effects of what it means for everyday life for you now, for some people that'll listen to this, or for whoever you tell your story to, it will be very shocking. There'll be realizations that, like you said before, you didn't know when the pandemic hit how serious it was, whether you were going to get it or not. And I think a lot of people, most people possibly, I don't like using the word most, but I think a lot of people just didn't understand. We were getting stories of, it affecting people really badly. And then some people, there was the media saying it's not as bad, and, all these different things that fly around. And I think it makes it very, very difficult. But you're able to say it in such a positive way, and you've been resilient enough to be able to do that. I'd love to know what other positive things have come out of this. Not only we can start with, I suppose, the lockdown, the pandemic itself, and being at home, because some of these coping strategies and just getting through each day, especially if you're not working as much or if you're feeling under the weather. But also in terms of, your health journey as well. What other positives have you found from the whole process?
There've been quite a lot of positives, actually. I mean, it's been so difficult, don't get me wrong, it's been awful. And, in addition to my own health journey, I've lost 2 family members to COVID and 1 close friend to COVID. And that's been very difficult. So it's had a really huge impact on my whole family. And it has taken its toll, but there are positives that I can draw from it. I mean, as you mentioned about lockdown, the time that I've had to spend with my son, that's been invaluable. And even though I've been tearing my hair out trying to homeschool at times, because I mean, I didn't learn half of this stuff in school and he wants my help with it. I'll just be like, no idea what a long fraction is. I don't know. No idea. But I've also done some decorating around the house, and it's amazing what a new coat of paint can do to a room, and can instantly make you feel better about that living space, because you've revamped it, it's looking a bit brighter, a bit newer. You stuck a couple of plants in there in the hopes that they'll brighten things up temporarily. Yeah. I've got some plastic ones now, we're fine, don't worry.
That's all right. It's compromise.
But there's a couple of things that I also did as well. I started doing volunteer work. So because I found the pandemic and the isolation very lonely and very difficult, in terms of, I mean, I only have a very small family anyway, but not being able to see them, but also the communication wasn't really there either, because we were not big phone people, we were face-to-face people. We didn't do all these phone calls and FaceTimes and all of that, so that was all very new. So yeah, I found it a very isolating time and a very lonely time, and I still do, to be honest. But one of the things that I did was volunteered for the NHS. And I picked up a couple of different roles with the NHS. Now, I did when I was recovering a bit more. So earlier on this year, when I was a bit more capable, I was just doing things like picking up prescriptions for people in the local area, or delivering swabs for the COVID tests. Just really local area, 5 minutes drive, just literally to and from my local chemist. But one of the main things I was doing was, just from the comfort of my own home, something with the NHS called Check and Chat. Okay. So anyone that's maybe clinically vulnerable, elderly, isolated, doesn't really have much of a support network, the GP can refer them for this Check and Chat service, or they can refer themselves. And basically what it means is either daily, weekly, fortnightly, or monthly, an NHS volunteer like myself will call them up and just have a chat. So
incredible. I never knew about that.
Oh, I loved it, honestly. When you're feeling isolated and you can't leave the house, and you feel like you've got nobody to talk to, all I had to do, pick up the phone to a random stranger. And I mean, I spoke to this one lady all the way down at the bottom of the country. She was so grateful for the call. She hadn't spoken to anyone that week.
Wow.
We chatted about absolutely nothing. I probably told her about my dead house plants as well. And
famous,
it's just but it's just great. It was a way of keeping my mind focused and helping me feel less isolated, but it's helping them as well. So it's a mutually beneficial venture, and I still do the NHS volunteering now. And I also, another thing that I did, again, restricted to my own house, what can you do? I thought, let's have a look at online learning, things that I could perhaps pick up in lockdown. I thought, maybe shall I have a look at picking up a language, or what kind of training could I do? And I'm actually at Christmas, I decided to do COVID training. So I decided to train up on the swabbing process, so that if I was called upon to volunteer at a swabbing site, I'd be trained on how to actually test people for COVID. I trained up on vaccinating people for COVID. I did a whole NHS care certificate in COVID, and also trained in end of life bereavement COVID care as well. So just, you know, when you're stuck at home and your resources are limited, I think even just a free online course in maybe basic first aid, because like everyone should know some sort of basic first aid just in case, because you never know when that's going to come in handy.
Yeah.
And you can just do a free course on that online, and it's something that keeps you focused, keeps your mind ticking over. But yeah, for me, the COVID side of things, it was really important to get some qualifications in helping out in COVID care, and in vaccinations as well, because I've recently started working at the vaccination centres with St John Ambulance. But I think, again, because of the massive effect that COVID had on me and my family, it felt really important to help in the fight against it.
Yes, I was just going to ask that actually. Do you think that influenced it or made it any stronger, your kind of want to do that? Because that's fantastic, because that's, again, enabling you to be able to help others. Especially on the back of, you know, the kind of the journey that you've had. But yeah, I mean, you've said a lot of things there that it's sometimes about thinking, like you said, thinking about what you can do, but also thinking outside your box of normal stuff that Gemma would do.
Yeah.
So things like online learning, you know, there's so many online courses that are either free or there's some very cheap ones. Things like, you know, there's, I've seen websites like Future Learn that I've used, or Centre of Excellence, and there's online diplomas in various things. So, you know, actually using that energy and that time to be able to develop yourself, you know, get some more of that knowledge, or know that you are more prepared, like you said, with the first aid, or do something that actually you've seldom had the time to be able to do before. And I think especially when we're all in full lockdown and we couldn't leave for any reason apart from maybe one shopping trip a week, there were some really good, and I personally found there were some really good ways of, again, like you said, keep that mental stimulation, you know, keep every day a little bit different as well, because otherwise, I mean, we've already encountered the fact that days are blurring into one, because before we even started, we didn't know which day it was. We were trying to decide whether it was Tuesday or not.
I mean, my next door neighbour, she texts me something about the bins going out, because, you know, we put each other's bins out and we help out, and she put something there about it being May, and I hadn't even realised we were in May already.
Yes.
I mean, my head is still in March.
But it is crazy, that concept of time, though, isn't it? Because
bizarre,
again, when we look at this moment that we're in now, the construct of a day, an hour, a month is all something that's been fabricated to give us some kind of direction onto what day we're in. But sometimes time flies and sometimes time goes really slow. Just on what you said about your neighbour actually in the bins, and we do that as well. I've never felt closer to my community, but I do think we're in a society now where we don't, as a rule, I find that we're not quite as close as we were when I was younger. We used to know all the neighbours. We used to look at the houses when they go on holiday. And now it seems like everything's just a little bit separated. Like, you don't often know. You can be there for a while and not see who comes out of that house, or not know who they are. Do you think for you, interactions like that, do you think the pandemic, the COVID, and everyone's priorities changing and everyone's ability to be able to leave the house changing and things like that, do you think that's made an effect on your surroundings in terms of your community? Or
I mean, like, for me personally, when I had COVID, obviously there's a 2 weeks isolation, but then for months after that, I was still really reluctant to even talk to anyone, because I was just so conscious, you know, what if this virus is still in me, is still around me, and you know, what if I passed it on? And I think that it's strange. I've noticed different mentalities with people. So there's some people that have gone cautious and slightly withdrawn, and they don't want to get involved with the community. Yeah. And then there's the others that are going a bit stir crazy and they want to talk to everybody. Yeah. And then there's ones that just don't really understand or want to know about the seriousness of COVID, and maybe don't really buy into it as much. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole different mindset going on with different people. And yeah, certainly my neighbours, things have changed, because my next door neighbour, we've seen each other once in the last, since March, when the first pandemic ever started, 2020, we've seen each other once, whereas we would have seen each other probably every day before. But she doesn't like to leave the house. So it's harder to stay connected. But like we said before, the virtual world really helps with that. And I can send her a message and say, which bin is it this week? And
but yeah, it's hard enough to remember which bin it is, isn't it?
That's why I talk to these neighbours, really, because I haven't got a clue which bin it is. I'll text Sheila in the morning. I'll say, Sheila, which bin is it today?
Or the best one is if you just look out and look at everyone else's and hope that everyone else has got the same colour out, and you go, oh,
yeah. But our back of the house is our front of the house, so it doesn't back onto anyone else's bin area. Very frustrating.
Oh dear, you missed out on that one then.
I know, yeah. But yeah, I think it's changing things. And I think that, now with restrictions lifting as well, I mean, we can go for a meal with people, and I've noticed a real influx of people wanting to do that, but then also a lot of people that really don't, and it's a tough one.
Yeah, because as much as there's people cheering on and the rules relaxing, there's also another set of people that are still anxious about, about COVID.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think there should be, and I hope there is. I can't say there isn't because I don't know for definite, but still them services like the chat service that you were doing. Do you still do that now?
Yeah, it's still ongoing. Yeah, I think that'll continue for a good while. Actually, I think there's been enough of an uptake on it for it to carry on. So I don't see why not.
No, I mean that's amazing. I think I know that in the community where I was over in Leeds, there's always the group of people that are happy, like you said, the people that want to kind of get out and do everything and do all the volunteering and start the help groups and make sure people have got their essential shopping and things like that. And I think in some ways it's brought some communities closer together.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's also brought people of all different mindsets, like you said, about the people that weren't really, I suppose, buying into it or weren't really believing the severity of it, or had all these different beliefs. And everyone is, everyone's allowed to have different beliefs.
Yeah, of course.
But it does form these different groups. But I think ultimately it's brought people closer, even though we haven't been able to get out there because of the medium of using Zoom or using, all the online conferencing tools and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's things that have brought us together as well, like the clapping for the NHS and the whole thing with Sir Tom Moore and all the things that even though everybody is totally different and everyone's got totally different opinions, abilities, walks of life, etc. We are all in a pandemic together. And there's plenty of things that have come out of that, senses of community and things that have brought people together throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And hopefully more will come out of it as well, because I think people have had to, and I've had to reevaluate what my priorities are.
Yeah.
And there's almost that little bit, I'm almost a little bit more grateful of what I do have. And like you said about your situation, so the things that you can do. So I would love, as a side note, I would love the media to start, I think it's a bit late, but to start focusing on the positives now.
Yeah.
Because I think there's been an overall, and it doesn't help if people are nervous or people are unsure about things. But when you see the news, there does tend to be a bit of a negative slant on everything to do with the pandemic, everything to do with, I mean, I don't even know what's a lot of the stuff. Obviously there's some stuff you see on social media, but there's stuff around the world that we probably haven't heard of that we normally would have heard of because everything's been around the pandemic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that it can just be too overwhelming as well. Certainly when it all first kicked off and the media around it was very negative and very overpowering.
Yeah.
I think that it scared a lot of people, and it made the situation feel a lot more doom and gloom than it was. And when you are stuck inside your house, you're in a lockdown, you've only got the TV and the radio to listen to, and it's all negative stories. I think that can be difficult. And I mean, for me personally, one of the things that I did, I came off social medias for a while. In fact, I came off altogether and just had one for my business page kind of thing and work. But also I just stopped reading news articles on my phone, just had that time without my phone, no screen time, just put it down, stop looking at it, because you can just get overwhelmed, and it's not all fact, is it? So
no, it's not. There is a lot of it that's spin, or it's for an agenda, and that's typical of the news. That's not anything that's new, but I definitely think there's something important what you've just said there. That we speak a lot about being able to deal with things, or deal with things head on, or be strong enough to cope with things. But I think in terms of the news and social media, if you're finding something not being very helpful for you, if it's not serving you very well, if it's giving you ill feeling, if you're feeling anxious from saying, take yourself away from it. You don't have to learn how to cope with looking at it.
Yeah.
Take yourself away from it and actually, have a look at what you have. What does this situation mean for you as a person? Because we have a lot of outside influences, and the world, I've learned, is full of people like me, and probably yourself as well, full of people that will prioritize doing things for other people before themselves.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you just got to look a bit harder for them, but they do exist. They are out there.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so important to be able to, as we're talking to Vicky on the last episode, and obviously Vicky as well, but it can be so difficult to prioritize helping yourself. But at the end of the day, if you don't help yourself, then you aren't going to be very good at, or be in a position to be able to help others as effectively as you would do. So I think it's imperative to keep that message going, that we should be looking after us to be able to look after others.
Absolutely.
It's not that traditional sense of being selfish or self-absorbed, or all these negative connotations we get about focusing on ourselves. It's about self-care. It's about maintaining us the same as we would our children, our family members, especially when you're not together as much, especially as we've been in this lockdown situation and you are by yourself. So it's important to look after yourself, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if I've always been one of those people that tries to put other people first and tries to help everybody else, and in the past I've done that to my own detriment, because I've thought it's selfish to look after me. I want to look after them. But what you've got to realize is that you can look after yourself with the sole purpose of looking after somebody else better, because like you said, then taking care of yourself makes you a better, more stable person to then support somebody else. So it's really important to start with you, because if you're falling apart and things are going wrong for you, then you can't do that thing that you want to do of helping other people to the best of your ability, because you're not being your best version of yourself.
Yeah, I think we're incredibly lucky in this country as well to have the NHS, and I do work with and speak to some nurses or some medical professionals or some of the other emergency services, or in care, or whether it's be even veterinary, looking after animals. When it's looking at health, it's the people that are helping people with their health that I think we need to just be a little bit more aware of, and obviously people that are affected as well, but just be a little bit more aware of in terms of doing things too much for others and cutting corners when it comes to looking after themselves. And I think we're going to find there's a bit of a fallout from that. But if we can help those people, You know, if we can just understand, and hopefully, you know, the NHS will, as you say, it's been doing the, you know, it's been doing the chat services, and it's done a lot. You know, it's done a lot to help us get through this. But hopefully, there's some more support for the people that are actually running the NHS. You know that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, but like with the chat service, I mean, we can all adopt that in a similar sort of way. Like, you know, we can all pick up the phone to somebody we know that we haven't spoken to in a while, and you never know how much that means to somebody else. I mean, like for me, throughout my illness, a couple of people don't know how much they have meant to me just by sending a card or picking the phone up or sending a text. You know, they've really probably not realized how valuable that has been to me. So I think we can all adapt some of that mentality, and especially with healthcare workers, because, you know, I mean, I spent time on a COVID ward over Christmas time, and I saw the pressures and the strains and everything that they were under. And I did a similar sort of thing, you know, took them to one side, said, how are you feeling? How is your day? And one of them said to me, you know, no one ever asks us that. So I think it's really important just to always check in on people where you can.
It is, and as we just said, it's about looking after yourself to be able to look after other people. Yeah. So, in essence, people that are working for the NHS and various similar services, that needs to be looking after them to enable them to look after other people. It's the same cycle, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But it's been absolutely wonderful to speak to you and just find out a little bit more. And I am going to put you on the spot now. Now, I did give you the premise that this was going to be a completely organic chat, and it is a completely organic chat. But I do like to play a little trick because I'm a guy that's like that.
Go on.
I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you if there was one, or maybe two or three, if you've got more, tips to give to anyone that may be watching or listening to this on being able to deal with something that's either so unexpected, or on the days when you're feeling a little bit lost, on ways that you can, whether it's coping mechanisms or it's way that you can be positive or get more out of your day, out of the reams and reams of things that you must have done and tried.
Yes, I think for me, because my mood fluctuated so much and the way I was feeling physically fluctuated so much, I really tried to focus on the here and now and break things down into hourly bite-sized pieces throughout the day. Yeah. So I didn't think, oh God, I need to do this today, or you know, it's such a time, or I've got to I mean, maybe I have certain tasks that I want to get done in the day. I sort of thought, right, okay, this is hour number 1. So this is 9 till 10. This is the first hour of my working day as it is. So if I break this hour down into 2 halves, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and start one task in the first half an hour, and then in the second half an hour I'm going to make sure that I make myself a brew and sit down for 5 minutes with the radio or something similar. So I really tried to cut my day into little hourly chunks, and even if I just found 5 minutes within that hour to take a small break, I made sure I factored that into whatever I was doing. And if I was feeling particularly down, I would say, right, okay, so there's maybe, I don't know, 6 hours left of this day. I'm going to try for this first 1 hour to do maybe some meditation, or maybe listen to some uplifting music, or try and text somebody, just have a chat with somebody. And then I'm going to see how I feel in the next hour. And if I don't feel any better at all, then I'm going to try something else. And I just have like a list of things that would be really, really basic, like have a bath, have a cup of tea, you know, watch a favorite episode or a favorite film or something, listen to a favorite song, text somebody, pick the phone up, have a chat with somebody, do a doodle, do a painting. I had a list of all these different things I could possibly do, and I'd break my day down into hours and try and factor at least one feel good thing into that time. So that was one of my main things, because I think that breaking it down into hours rather than seeing a whole day ahead of you makes it a lot less overfacing and overpowering. And especially because we didn't know how long the pandemic was going to go on for. You know, you'd be looking at the news and it'd be saying potentially weeks and months. Well, I think it's really important to stay in the present moment, try and stay grounded, focus on the here and now, take it in bite-sized chunks, and just really kind of take it from there. but that was really it for me. And those things that I mentioned, just really basic things, maybe nip out into the garden for 5 minutes, just listen to the birds or whatever it may be that makes you, or could potentially make you feel slightly better. Make a list of those things and try and factor 1 or 2 of them into the day.
Yeah, perfect. So things that you know, even before you feel like that, things that you have already qualified, that you know that they feel good, or they're getting you fresh air or some sunlight, or, you know, there's those things that you can rely on when you're not feeling at your best, when you're not feeling that judgment can be trusted.
Absolutely. Yeah, or just, you know, read a book or pick up some of online learning, like we were saying about before. Do a chapter of your online learning, whatever subject you've chosen to learn about, whatever that may be. Do a subject to that, read a chapter of a book, anything to put your mind somewhere else and try and take you to a better space.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you again for your time today, Gemma. I really do appreciate it.
No, it's been good. Enjoyed it.
Good. Is this your first podcast, by the way, or have you done many more?
I'll tell you, until this year, I did not know what a podcast was. I'm sorry to say, but somebody, as part of this mindfulness that I've been banging on about, somebody said to me, "Oh, why don't you try listen to a podcast?" And I was like, "What's a podcast?" And I listened to my first one either in January or February, and I've listened to quite a few since, but I've never been on one. So thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
You're absolutely welcome, and thank you for sharing the story. And hopefully, if there's anyone what I'd always like is if there's anyone, if you're listening to this and you've listened to me and Gemma talk about various things, and you know something resonates with you, or you can take something away from it, please do send us a message. If anyone did want to get in touch with you or ask you any questions, 1, would you be okay with that? And 2, if yes, I realise I've just skipped past the first question. What is the best way for them to get hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely, no problems with that at all. More than happy to talk at any time. I guess probably the best ways to get in touch with me are on LinkedIn, which I use for my main professional work purposes. But yeah, you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn, or even from a social media perspective, I have Instagram with the book itself. So on Instagram, I'm at Ben the Wren. I'm happy to take any messages through there, any questions, any comments, anything.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And have a good evening, won't you?
Thank you, and you too.
What an incredible conversation with an equally incredible, strong, resilient person. It was great to be able to speak to Gemma, and thank you again for spending the time to come on here and spread some fantastic messages. Now, don't forget, if you want to check out some of the websites, some of the apparel and things that I do, it's www.imdoingitfor.me. Please make sure you click subscribe and the little bell on YouTube to be notified of any further videos. And please feel free to check out and comment on some of the other episodes as well. We've got people from physios, people in the mental health industry, to coaches, to all sorts, people that have been on all sorts of journeys, and it's just fantastic to be able to share their stories. So from me, from my guest, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and stay super.